ಚೇಂಜ್ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ನೋಡೋದು ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಶೇರ್ ಅನ್ಬಿಡೋದು ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೆಳಗೆ ಬರ್ತೈತ್ರಿ ಈಗ ಅಪ್ಡೇಟ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಅಷ್ಟು ತೊಗೊಂಡ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಆಯ್ತು
ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ Good morning, students.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Today I will teach you the next part of the peritoneum. Yesterday I finished the mesentery. Today I'm going to start with the falciform ligament. The ligaments. These are also the two-layered folds which connect the lesser mobile viscera to the abdominal wall. There are different ligaments. Ligaments pertaining to the liver are the falciform ligament. The falciform ligament, it is a bilaminar fold of the peritoneum which extends from this is the sagittal section, which extends from the anterior abdominal wall to the diaphragm and the liver. The falciform ligament, the anterior border is attached to the undersurface of the diaphragm and the anterior abdominal wall. This is the anterior abdominal wall and the undersurface of the diaphragm. That's the anterior border which is attached to anterior abdominal wall and the diaphragm. Posterior border, this is the posterior border. This white thing serrated is the falciform ligament. This is the posterior border. The posterior border is attached to superior surface and the anterior surface of the liver. This free margin which is present below, it connects the umbilicus to the inferior margin of the liver. This free margin contains ligamentum teres hepatis, which is nothing but the remnant of obliterated left umbilical artery. Okay, don't confuse ligamentum teres left umbilical artery, LL, obliterated left umbilical artery, not the right one. So this contains free margin contains the ligamentum teres hepatis. So the falciform ligament, it extends from the umbilicus and the anterior abdominal wall. So it is present above the umbilicus. The falciform ligament, when it reflects on the liver, here we can see this is right lobe of the liver, this is left lobe of the liver. This is the falciform ligament. Anterior border which is attached to the anterior abdominal wall. The posterior border which is attached to the liver posteriorly, and this is the free margin which contains the ligamentum teres hepatis. Okay, these are the two lobes of the liver. This falciform ligament has two layers. This is the left layer which we can see, which extends over the anterior surface and superior surface of the left lobe of the liver. So it spreads, the falciform ligament, it spreads the right layer and the left layer over the liver. So this is the left lobe. The other side we have the right layer which extends over the right lobe of the liver. There's the anterior surface and the posterior surface. Here the anterior abdominal wall is removed. You can see the attachment of the falciform ligament. The right layer extends over the right lobe of the liver, the superior surface and the anterior surface. The left layer, this extends over the left lobe, anterior surface and the superior surface of the liver, and hence it is reflected over the diaphragm as a coronary ligament. This is the anterior weave of the liver. This is the superior weave of the liver. This is the attachment of the falciform ligament. The right and left layers, they diverge and attach to the respective lobes of the liver. And when we extend above. It is attached to the diaphragm and hence it is reflected over the liver. So when we trace it, the right layer it continues as the right coronary ligament. This is superior layer. The left layer it continues as the anterior layer of the left coronary ligament. This is the posterior layer of left coronary ligament. This is the left coronary ligament on the left lobe of the liver. So the coronary ligament has anterior layer and the posterior layer. In between this, it's a bare area. Bare area is the part of the liver which is not covered by the peritoneum. Okay, it's bare, not covered by the peritoneum. Similarly, on the right side, this right layer it reflects as the right coronary ligament. This is the posterior view. Here we can see this is the superior layer of the right coronary ligament and this is inferior layer of right coronary ligament. These two layers they approximate on the right side as right triangular ligament. There is no right triangular ligament on the left side actually. It's called left coronary ligament. This is right triangular ligament and the two layers of the coronary ligament. This is the left triangular, the anterior layer and the posterior layer. There is no coronary ligament. On the right side, there is a coronary ligament. Okay, in between this, it's a bare area. It comes directly in contact with the diaphragm. So these two layers, the superior layer and the inferior layer of coronary ligament, they are reflected above over the diaphragm. Here also same. Left triangular ligament, it is reflected over the diaphragm. So in between these two layers is a bare area. That is the falciform ligament and how it is reflected over the liver. Then ligaments related to the stomach. So from the liver, here you can see this is the porta hepatis. Around the porta hepatis and the fissure for the ligamentum venosum, the peritoneum of the greater sac and the lesser sac, it is reflected downwards as a lesser omentum. This is the anterior layer of the lesser omentum which is contributed by the greater sac and this is the posterior layer of lesser omentum which is contributed by the peritoneum of the lesser sac. See this caudate lobe, as we have discussed yesterday, it is covered by the peritoneum of the lesser sac. So from the posterior lip of the porta hepatis, it is reflected downwards as a posterior layer of lesser omentum. From the anterior lip, the peritoneum of the greater sac reflected downwards as the anterior layer of lesser omentum. This is the lesser omentum. From the porta hepatis, this extends downwards over the lesser curvature of the stomach, that is lesser omentum. The lesser omentum, the anterior layer covers the anterior surface of the stomach, posterior layer covers the posterior surface of the stomach. From the upper part of the stomach, that is from the fundus, it is reflected over the diaphragm as gastrophrenic ligament. Phrenic is related to the diaphragm. From the stomach to the diaphragm is gastrophrenic ligament. When we trace little downwards from the greater curvature, the upper part of the greater curvature, it is reflected over the spleen as gastrosplenic ligament. From the spleen, it is reflected back on the posterior abdominal wall as splenorenal ligament. Over the greater part of the greater curvature, most part of the greater curvature, the anterior and posterior layers they descend down and forms the greater omentum. So these are the ligaments of the stomach: gastrophrenic ligament, gastrosplenic ligament. This is the anterior view. If we take a transverse section at the level of T12, you can see This red line is the peritoneum of the greater sac. Blue line is the peritoneum of the lesser sac. This is from the liver. It extends downwards. This is the lesser omentum, right free margin containing the three structures: hepatic artery, bile duct, and the portal vein. At the free margin, the two layers, the peritoneum of the greater sac and the lesser sac, are continuous. The anterior layer covers the anterior surface of the stomach and forms the anterior layer of gastrosplenic ligament. This layer, it covers all around. It covers the whole of the spleen and reflected back as posterior layer of linorenal ligament. You note this. The peritoneum of the greater sac forms the anterior layer of gastrosplenic ligament, whereas this covers the whole of the spleen and reflected back on the anterior surface of left kidney as posterior layer of linorenal ligament. This is the peritoneum of the lesser sac, which covers the posterior surface of the stomach, posterior layer of gastrosplenic ligament, then reflected back as anterior layer of linorenal ligament. You got this? Like how the reflections from the stomach to the spleen and kidney helps in the formation of gastrosplenic ligament, linorenal ligament. You understood this?
Ma'am.
Yes, okay. The anterior layer of linorenal ligament, it covers the anterior surface of the kidney and it covers the anterior surface of the middle part of the posterior abdominal wall, and thence it continues with the peritoneum of the greater sac. You can see the continuity. Vertical tracing of the peritoneum. We start from one point and we trace the reflection of the peritoneum over different organs. We start from the umbilicus, then over the liver, then from the liver to different organs, then it will enter into the pelvic cavity, from the anterior abdominal wall again to the umbilicus. That is the vertical tracing which we are doing. Be attentive. Vertical tracing, like how the peritoneum reflects. We have seen the falciform ligament. We start from the umbilicus. From the umbilicus, the falciform ligament, it stretches from the undersurface of the anterior abdominal wall to the liver and the diaphragm. This falciform ligament, it has two layers, as already I have discussed. The left layer will cover the anterior surface, superior surface of the left lobe and forms the left triangular ligament reflected over the diaphragm. This is diaphragm. Then after covering, it again descends down as the posterior layer of left triangular ligament, covers the posterior surface of the liver. Here this right layer covers the anterior surface, superior surface of the right lobe of the liver, then reflected over the diaphragm as the superior layer of coronary ligament. This is the posterior surface, superior layer of coronary ligament, then right triangular ligament, then reflected back from the diaphragm. Again it is reflected as superior and inferior, the inferior layer of coronary ligament. So this part is called the bare area of the liver. Between the two layers of the coronary ligament, right triangular ligament, which forms the apex, base is formed by the groove for the inferior vena cava. This is the bare area which comes in direct contact with the diaphragm. Okay, you have to imagine, over this we have the diaphragm and the right layer of the falciform ligament, which after covering the liver, it is reflected on the diaphragm by superior and inferior layer of coronary ligament. Here they have removed the diaphragm. That's why we can see this bare area. Okay, this is the posterior surface of the liver. Okay. Then this inferior layer of coronary ligament, it is reflected as over the right lobe of the liver below the bare area, covers the fundus of the gallbladder, then reflected over this is the sagittal section from the gallbladder. From this part, fundus of the gallbladder, quadrate lobe of the liver, it is reflected down over the right suprarenal gland and right kidney, right hepatic flexure and the right paracolic, the ascending colon. Okay. So there forms a pouch or a gap between the undersurface of the the gallbladder, and the anterior surface of the right kidney, right suprarenal gland, and right hepatic flexure. There appears a small space which is called as hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. This is a dependent area in the supine position. What is dependent area? Dependent area is the one during particular position, it will be at a lower position so that any secretions, any fluid will be collected in that space. That is called a dependent area. This hepatorenal pouch of Morrison is the dependent area in the supine position. Okay, any fluid collects in the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. Okay, so this is the reflection on the right side. Okay, this it forms here, it is continuous. No, we have seen the greater peritoneum of the greater sac continuous with the peritoneum of the lesser sac. So this part is covered by peritoneum of the lesser sac. The posterior layer of the lesser omentum is formed by peritoneum of the lesser sac, which descends down as posterior layer of lesser omentum. This is the anterior layer of lesser omentum, which is the attachment of the lesser omentum. This is the horizontal limb. This is the vertical limb of the lesser omentum. So here already we have seen the left layer of falciform ligament. It covers the left lobe of the liver, reflected as left triangular ligament. Then it covers the posterior surface of left lobe of the liver. Then reflected over the stomach as lesser omentum. See, this is the lesser omentum. More on the right side we have traced till this hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. Then it is reflected on the ascending colon. Then continuous below with this is a right paracolic gutter. It's a gutter-like space on the lateral side or right side of the ascending colon. Then it is continuous with the pelvic cavity. Okay, this is more on the right side. Now we'll reflect. Now we'll trace from the lesser omentum, from the liver to the stomach as lesser omentum, then from the greater curvature to the diaphragm as gastrosplenic ligament, from the stomach to the spleen as gastrosplenic ligament, spleen to the posterior abdominal wall and the left kidney as leno-renal ligament. Okay, this is the reflection you have to imagine. Okay, then from the greater part of the greater curvature, this descends down as, see, this is the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. The liver is pulled upwards so that you can see the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. This is the right kidney, right colic flexure forming the posterior boundary of the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. Anteriorly, as it is reflected, you can see the posterior surface of the right lobe of the liver and the gallbladder. That forms the anterior boundary. So when it is in position, there is a small space. As they have reflected, we can see this hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. From the greater curvature and the proximal part of the first part of duodenum, it is reflected downwards as greater omentum. Okay, this is all reflection I have told, from the stomach to the spleen and kidney. Then this is the greater omentum, which has two layers. In the anterior part, two layers in the posterior part. This is the first layer, which is the anterior layer of lesser omentum. This extends downwards for some degree, then it reflects back as fourth layer. Second layer continues as third layer. So there remains a space of the lesser sac between the second and third layer of the greater omentum. Then this already you know, like before puberty and after puberty, the second and third layers, there is a space of the lesser sac. But after puberty, second and third layers, they get fused with each other. So the space of the lesser sac is reduced. And also, the fourth layer of the greater omentum gets attached to the upper layer of the primitive transverse mesocolon by a process of zygosis. So, the fourth layer covers the inferior and posterior surface of the transverse colon, reflected as inferior layer of transverse mesocolon. This third layer covers the superior surface and anterior surface, reflected as upper layer of transverse mesocolon, then covers the posterior abdominal wall, the anterior surface of the body of the pancreas. Then it is reflected, it covers the posterior abdominal wall and reflected to form the mesentery, which suspends the coils of the small intestine. So this is the right layer and left layer of the mesentery. Here we can see, which is reflected. Then this is the root of the mesentery, where the attached part of the mesentery is attached. Free border suspends the coils of the small intestine. This is the right layer, which covers the posterior right side of this root of mesentery. This left layer, which covers the left side of the root of the mesentery. Then it covers the descending colon. Descending colon covers the front and sides, then reflected over the posterior abdominal wall and lateral abdominal wall. Then it forms the sigmoid mesocolon. The sigmoid colon and transverse colon, they are mobile because they are suspended by the mesentery, by mesocolon and sigmoid mesocolon. This is the root of the sigmoid mesocolon, where it is attached. The free border suspends the sigmoid colon. So from this part, it enters into the pelvic cavity. Here it covers the rectum. This is in the pelvic cavity, the sagittal section. Here we can see this is the rectum. It covers the front and sides of upper 1/3 of the rectum. The lower 1/3, it covers only the anterior surface, reflected over the seminal vesicles, the upper part of the posterior surface of the bladder, superior surface of the bladder, then reflected over the anterior abdominal wall till the umbilicus. So from umbilicus we have started, then all around traced from the pelvis, again we have reached the umbilicus. Okay, this is in case of males. There forms a pouch or the space between the rectum and the bladder. This is called as rectovesical pouch. This is a dependent space in case of males, which is 7.5 centimeters above the anal opening. In case of females, this reflection is different because the uterus, it intervenes between the bladder and the rectum. Okay. This is the transverse section of the pelvis in case of males. Here we can see this is the rectum, the bladder. You can see the reflections. and from the lateral surface they go laterally. So lateral to the bladder there is a paravesical fossa, and lateral to the rectum it is pararectal fossa. In case of females, the reflection is different because of the presence of uterus in between the bladder and the rectum. From the rectum, the middle 1/3, which covers the anterior surface, it is reflected over. This is uterus, vagina, and this middle part is the cervix. It is reflected over the upper 1/3 of the vagina, covers the body of the uterus, fundus, anterior surface of the body of the uterus. It will not cover the till the vagina. And the posteriorly it is more extensive than anteriorly. You can compare. This is vagina. Anteriorly it is not covering vagina or the cervix. Only on the posterior part it is covering the upper 1/3 of the vagina. Okay. And it reflects over the superior surface of the bladder, then anterior abdominal wall to the umbilicus. Okay, this is the reflection of the peritoneum in case of females. As the uterus intervenes between the bladder and the rectum, there forms two pouches. The pouch present between the rectum and the uterus is the recto-uterine pouch of Douglas. This is the dependent area. It is 5.5 centimeters above the anus. And this thing, the space between the uterus and the bladder is uterovesical pouch. This is a recto-uterine pouch. This is the uterovesical pouch. So there forms two pouches in case of females. This is the transverse section of the pelvis in case of females. You can see from the rectum it covers the posterior part of the vagina, then this thing, body of the fundus, covers all around, reflected over the uterus, the bladder, then to the anti-abdominal wall. When we trace this peritoneum which has reflected over the diaphragm, it forms the broad ligament. This thing is the broad ligament. In the posterior wall of the broad ligament, we have the fallopian tube. See, this is fallopian tube, and the ovary attached to the posterior layer of the broad ligament. This on both sides we have the broad ligaments. So this broad ligament, it acts like a partition between the rectum and the bladder. Okay. When we trace these two layers laterally, it forms the broad ligament. Here you can see this is the pelvic ostia, or the lateral end of the fallopian tube, which is fimbriated. This here it is open to receive the ovum which is released by the ovary. So the ovum released by the ovary enters into the fallopian tube through the fimbriated end. Then it travels through the fallopian tube, enters into the uterus. And the peritoneal cavity is open here. As the fimbriated end, it converges over the ovary and it is open. The peritoneal cavity, general peritoneal cavity, it opens into, it is connected with the pelvic ostium, fallopian tube, uterus, vagina, outside. So the peritoneal cavity in case of females, it is open. Here this is the apex of the bladder, which covers the posterior abdominal wall till this is umbilicus. This is sagittal section. Here this is the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall. This is anterior abdominal wall. We are viewing it from behind. We are seeing it from behind. So this is the parietal peritoneum which is covering the anterior abdominal wall. In the posterior surface of the anterior abdominal wall, we can see some folds such as the median umbilical fold. This is median umbilical fold. which contains the median umbilical ligament, which is nothing but the obliterated urachus, which connects the apex with the umbilicus. Then lateral to this is a medial umbilical fold. This contains the obliterated umbilical artery. Then lateral most is the lateral umbilical fold, which contains the inferior epigastric vessels. And the spaces between this, between the median umbilical ligament and the medial umbilical fold, and the medial umbilical fold, this fossa is called supravesical fossa. Supra is above, vesicle is bladder. This is the space of the fossa present above the bladder, supravesical fossa. The fossa between the medial umbilical fold and the lateral umbilical fold is called the medial inguinal fossa. Lateral to the inferior, lateral to the lateral umbilical fold is the lateral inguinal fossa. What is Hazelback's triangle? Does anybody know? What is Hazelback's triangle and why I am asking here? You might be thinking. Yes, what is Hazelback's triangle? We have already learnt about the anti-abdominal wall and the inguinal canal. Have you heard about? At least tell that. Have you heard about Hazelback's triangle? No?
No.
No? So nicely you will tell. No. Then you have not listened to the class inguinal canal and this thing. See, this is the impression of the rectus abdominis. Here you can see. This is the lateral border of the rectus abdominis. Here beneath the lateral inguinal fold, this contains the inferior epigastric vessels and below by the inguinal canal. Can you now remember? Hazelback's triangle is bordered by medially by the lateral border of rectus abdominis, laterally by the inferior epigastric vessels, below by the inguinal ligament. What is the importance of that Hazelback's triangle? Does it help to differentiate direct and indirect inguinal hernia? Which hernia will pass through that? Direct or indirect?
Direct.
Direct, yes. Directly from the posterior abdominal wall through the Hazelback's triangle. Here you can see this is medial inguinal fossa. Through this fossa, the contents of the anterior abdominal wall will protrude anteriorly, enters the inguinal canal, then into the scrotum. So that is the direct inguinal hernia. Lateral to this fold is if the hernia occurs, that is the indirect one, which passes through the deep ring, enters into the inguinal canal, later downwards. So this why I have told you is because here we can see the medial inguinal fossa and the inferior epigastric vessels beneath the lateral inguinal fossa. Here we can see the Hazelback's triangle. Horizontal tracing I am not teaching you because it is not that important. Now how the greater sac is divided. Already I have studied about lesser sac, how it is divided, like the upper part, lower part. We have not studied much about the greater sac. The greater sac is divided into two parts, the upper part and the lower part, by the transverse colon and transverse mesocolon. Above the transverse colon and transverse mesocolon, this part is called as supracholic compartment. Below part is called as infracholic compartment. There are different spaces in the supracholic compartment. The suprahepatic recess or the spaces. Suprahepatic, that is above the liver and beneath the diaphragm. These recesses may be called as subphrenic spaces. You have to remember one terminology, either suprahepatic or subphrenic. So I am explaining as suprahepatic. This is right suprahepatic, which is present between the undersurface of the right dome of the diaphragm and the right lobe of the liver, the anterior surface and superior surface, which is present above. That is suprahepatic, right suprahepatic recess. Left suprahepatic recess is present in between the undersurface of the liver and the anterior surface and superior surface of left lobe of the liver. That is left suprahepatic recess. Here we can see the right anterior suprahepatic recess, left anterior suprahepatic recess. And we have the right posterior subphrenic space, and similarly behind this is left posterior subphrenic space. Behind that, here we can see the anterior spaces, behind that we can see the posterior spaces. Then we have, like below the liver, we have infrahepatic spaces, such as right subhepatic space, which is present below the right lobe of the liver. This is also called as hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. Then left subhepatic space, that is present below the liver. This is also called as lesser sac. The infrahepatic recesses, here we can see beneath the liver. It is right infrahepatic recess, or also called as hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. Then left infrahepatic recess, which is present below the liver and behind the behind the stomach and the lesser omentum, that is the lesser sac. Okay, lesser sac is nothing but the left infrahepatic recess. The suprapolic compartment, we have four spaces: right suprahepatic recess, right infrahepatic recess, left suprahepatic recess, left infrahepatic recess. Similarly, two recesses behind, right posterior suprahepatic recess and left posterior suprahepatic recess. Among these spaces, the right infrahepatic recess is important, hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, and left infrahepatic recess, which is lesser sac, which we have already studied, is also important. The hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, in case of cholecystitis, we have the gallbladder. The inflammation of the gallbladder is called as cholecystitis. In that case, the fluid is collected in the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison in the supine position. That fluid may trickle through the epiploic foramen and collect in the lesser sac. Because the epiploic foramen, it connects the greater sac with the lesser sac. Any fluid collected in the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, it enters into the lesser sac. And the importance of the lesser sac is, in case of posterior perforation of the peptic ulcers, suppose peptic ulcer is there in the posterior wall of the stomach, it perforates. The fluid is collected in the lesser sac. The contents from the stomach, through the perforation, they enter into the lesser sac. And the acid present, it forms the inflammation, and that may close the epiploic foramen, and fluid is go on collecting in the lesser sac, and it will bulge into the stomach. That time it is necessary to drain out the contents of the lesser sac. See, this is left subhepatic space, that is lesser sac. Behind that, this is lesser omentum. This beneath that, this is hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. Hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, it's a commonly asked short answer, which you should know. Like hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, what is that? Where it is present? It is a dependent area in the supine position. See, the boundaries are, this is sagittal section of the abdomen. Anteriorly, the hepatorenal pouch of Morrison is bounded by the undersurface of right lobe of the liver, the gallbladder. Posteriorly, it is bounded by right suprarenal gland, right kidney, right hepatic flexure. This space is hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, and below it is continuous with the right paracolic gutter. That is hepatorenal pouch of Morrison. The boundaries. This is the anterior view. Liver is reflected up, so you can see this space. Actually, it's a very small space. It's not like a very big. In the supine position, these are the dependent areas. This is hepatorenal pouch of Morrison, where the fluid gets collected. In the reclining position or Fowler's position at 45-degree angle, or in the standing position, the vertical position, the dependent area is rectovesical pouch in case of males, and a rectouterine pouch of Douglas in case of females. We have studied about supracholic compartments. Now infracholic compartments, that is below the transverse colon and transverse mesocolon. That is, here we have the right paracolic gutter on the right side of ascending colon, left paracolic gutter on the left side of descending colon. This is the root of the mesentery. There is a space. This is right mesenteric space between the right side of the root of mesentery and the ascending colon. Right mesenteric sinus. This is left mesenteric sinus present between the root of the mesentery on left side, descending colon, and left 1/3 of the transverse mesocolon. This here it opens downwards into the pelvic cavity. So that is about the vertical tracing of the peritoneum and the different compartments of the greater sac as supracholic compartment, infracholic compartments. This rectovesical pouch or rectouterine pouch or pouch of Douglas may also be asked as a short answer. That's a dependent area in the reclining position. The fluids will be collected there as it is a dependent area. And sometimes it becomes necessary to drain the fluid in the pouch of Douglas. In case of females, in that case, the posterior colpotomy will be done to drain the fluid collected in the pouch of Douglas. Duodenal recesses. There are some. This is duodenojejunal flexure, which is suspended by ligament of Treitz. They form some angulation between duodenum and jejunum because of the attachment of ligament of Treitz. Close to the duodenojejunal flexure, there appear small pockets, the pouches of the peritoneum, which are called the superior duodenal recess, inferior duodenal recess, paraduodenal recess. Some pouches. Superior duodenal recess is present above, inferior is present below, para is present by the side of the this duodenojejunal flexure. This contains the inferior mesenteric vein. Paraduodenal recess contains the inferior mesenteric vein, and internal hernias may occur into this recess also. Nerve supply of the peritoneum. The parietal peritoneum, it is supplied by the phrenic nerve because as it is covering the diaphragm, it is supplied by phrenic nerve, intercostal nerves, first lumbar nerves, and obturator nerve, pelvic cavity. In the pelvic cavity, it is supplied by the obturator nerve. Visceral peritoneum is supplied by autonomic nerves, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So, the parietal peritoneum is sensitive to pain, temperature, sensation, pressure sensation. Whereas visceral peritoneum, it is because of stretching of the organs, it the person may feel little pain. Clinical aspects. Peritonitis is inflammation of the peritoneum. It may be localized or generalized. Localized peritoneum is because of inflammation of some organ. It is localized there. The pain will be felt around the site of infection, such as in case of appendicitis, we can feel the pain in the right iliac fossa. There will be pain, tenderness. What is tenderness? Do you know what is tenderness? What is the difference between pain and tenderness? Yes, anybody? Don't know? Pain is the thing which the person feels. And tenderness is, it is elicited by the doctor or the person who presses over the site of inflammation. Tenderness, suppose the doctor presses on the right iliac fossa. If he feels pain, that is tenderness. So tenderness is the pain which is elicited by pressing over the site of infection or inflammation. Pain, whereas the pain will be there before pressing, like pain will be there because of infection or inflammation at the site of infection. And as the pain will be there, the abdominal wall muscles, they contract to prevent, to either to localize, which causes rigidity in the muscles. When the localized pain, it spreads to the general peritoneal cavity, forms generalized peritonitis. That time the anterior abdominal wall muscles, they contract, and we can feel the cardboard rigidity, cardboard like rigidity over the anterior abdominal wall. It becomes hard, and the intestinal sounds become absent because the intestine is not functioning properly. Rebound tenderness, it's also the pain elicited when a pressure applied over the site of inflammation or the anti-abdominal wall, when it is pressed and released suddenly. When the fingers are taken out suddenly, because of rebound of the anterior abdominal wall, the person experiences extreme local pain. That is called rebound tenderness, which will be there in the generalized peritonitis. As we know, some amount of fluid will be there in the peritoneal cavity which lubricates, like around 20 to 50 ml. If this fluid, the amount of the fluid is increased, that's called ascites. Excess accumulation of the peritoneal fluid in the peritoneal cavity is called ascites or hydroperitoneum. The most common condition is cirrhosis of the liver, tuberculosis of the abdomen, and malignancies, some of the malignancies. The fluid will be collected in the abdominal peritoneal cavity. 1500 ml of the fluid collected will elicit the clinically recognizable symptoms of the ascites. If the amount is 1500 ml, then clinically it is recognizable, and the fluid collected should be drained out, otherwise it will stretch the abdomen and the person feels difficulty. The abdominal paracentesis is taking out the fluid from the abdomen. The needle is inserted just below the umbilicus to take out the fluid. Internal abdominal hernia, the loops of the intestine or the mesentery, it passes through the epiploic foramen and enter into the lesser sac. And sometimes peritoneal pouches of the recesses also. Sometimes it may get strangulated. That time it becomes emergency to treat. Perforation of the gastric ulcer. The posterior wall perforation, because of the gastric ulcers, the fluid will be collected in the lesser sac. If the anterior wall is perforated, the fluid will be collected in the pouch of Morrison. anterior. The epiploic foramen will be closed because of the adhesions, and the lesser sac will be distended. That times it becomes necessary to drain the fluid from the lesser sac. Either the posterior wall of the stomach is this thing, it is opened and taken out the fluid, or through the lesser omentum, a drainage tube is inserted and taken out the fluid. Peritoneal abscesses. In the already I have explained about this. Hepatorenal space, the fluid will be collected in the subphrenic space or hepatorenal space because of cholecystitis or perforation of the anterior wall of the stomach. And rectouterine pouch in the reclining position, phallus position, the rectovesical pouch, the fluid is collected, that's in the pelvic cavity, or pouch of Douglas, that is rectouterine pouch in case of females. See here, this is rectouterine pouch or pouch of Douglas. This is the posterior wall of the vagina. The needle is inserted. It's called posterior colpotomy to drain out the fluid collected in the pouch of Douglas. So that is about the peritoneal drainage. Sometimes the air will be collected because of perforation of the stomach. Air, it goes upwards and collected beneath the dome of the diaphragm. Laparotomy. Laparotomy is opening the abdominal wall to treat the some abdominal pathologies. That is opening the anterior abdominal wall is laparotomy. Laparoscopy is entering into the abdomen through a scope. A small incision is put on the anti-abdominal wall to avoid larger incisions. Laparoscopy is done. This is for the cosmetic reasons. The laparoscope is introduced. Like before introducing, the abdominal wall, abdomen is distended with the carbon dioxide to inflate, and the instruments are passed and they work at the site of pathology. That's called laparoscopy. Peritoneal dialysis, which is done sometimes in case of renal failure. As peritoneum, it can absorb the excretory products from the blood. A dialysis is introduced into the peritoneal cavity and later taken out to take out the urea and nitrates in case of renal failure. That is called peritoneal dialysis. One this thing that is about the peritoneum, different folds, tracings and all. Any doubts in that? Yes? Any doubts? No doubts?
ಆವಾಗಲೇ 6 months ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಇರೋದು.
Who is that? Who is affected?
So you require a lot of rest to get. ಎಷ್ಟು ಕಾಯಿನ್ಸ್ ಕಾಯಿನ್ ಕಾಂಟೆಸ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ.
Meghna Tiwari.
ಕಾಯಿನ್ ರೇಖ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೇನೆ ನೋಡಿ.
Yes. Any doubts? No doubts? Okay, you all are very clever. So I'll end with a clinical problem. At least here you should open your mouth to answer. This is a clinical problem. An 8-year-old boy was admitted to the hospital with a temperature of 101 degree Fahrenheit, a fur tongue, and a pain in the right lower quadrant. On examination, the skin on the right lower quadrant was tender to the touch, and the abdominal muscles were contracted and rigid. This is a case of acute appendicitis. So, what is the role of greater omentum in this case? You have to answer here. What is the role of greater omentum?
Greater omentum will cover the appendix.
Okay, it goes there and tries to cover it up to prevent the spread of infection from local site to the general peritoneal cavity. Okay, related to this question only, there is an MCQ. The symptoms and signs displayed by this patient can be explained with the following statements, except which an acutely inflamed appendix produces an inflammation of the peritoneal coat covering it. Should the inflammatory process spread, for example, if the appendix should rupture, the parietal peritoneum would become involved. The parietal peritoneum, the abdominal muscles, and the overlying skin are supplied by the same segmental spinal nerves. The segmental spinal nerves supplying the right lower quadrant of the abdominal wall are T7, T8, and T9. The pain in the right lower quadrant and the regional contraction of the abdominal muscles are an attempt by the body to keep the inflamed appendix immobile so that the inflammatory process remains localized. So, which is the wrong answer? Which is the wrong option? Yes.
Fourth
one, correct. Why?
lumbar
Which?
region.
Yes.
Nerve supplies from lumbar region.
This T7, T8, T9, they supply the upper part of the abdomen, whereas lower part of the abdomen, like below the umbilicus, it is supplied by which segments? T11, 12, and L1. Okay, those spinal segments will supply the lower part of the abdomen. Okay, so this is the end of the class. As you don't have any doubts, I'll conclude. Yes, shall I conclude?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.